I'm going to start with a little overview because it sounds like everyone today is familiar with web apps, but maybe in someone watching one of the recordings, watching this recording, they may be able to skip part of the presentation if it's something they're familiar with. There's a couple of ways to handle your security for Access web apps. One's with SharePoint permissions and one's with code in the web app. And I actually use both. And so for overview, what I'll do is I'll overview the permissions, I'll overview the app code, and then I'll come back and give you some examples. And that way, if you're watching this from a recording, you can move to the part that applies to you. So for SharePoint permissions, I always develop on my SharePoint, and then after testing, after the user has a chance to test it roughly on mine, then we move it to theirs. So I'm going to kind of show you how I set up my SharePoint, and part of this, hopefully this all runs smoothly, because just a couple of days ago my grandfathered small business premium came to an end, so I'm in process of moving my assets over into E3. So I have set up these root sites: demo, develop, Sylvan, which is my business, and test. And then on my client's site they have test and production. So say within a given site, the idea is you create a site that's just for the users of the app. And so while I'm developing, it's for the client, the folks that are helping to set up the development of this site. And then once they move it to their site, all their users, they will set up a site that's just for the users of the app. And depending on who your users are, you may need to break the inheritance, because so say I have in development, I may have 5 different clients that I'm developing for, and I don't want them crossing over or moving up into my team site. I want them just to have unique permissions in their subsite. So say over here in I'll show you my this is my old one, my small business premium. So all my different clients are here, but each one, say culinary, I've given them site permissions. And the default, when you set up a subsite, and it gives you 3 default that's for that site. It'd be culinary members, culinary owners, culinary visitors. And so the people you put in here, and especially since this has broken inheritance, they only can see culinary, and they only have member privileges. Okay, and then and I will, when I go back and give a demo, I will show you exactly how to set that up. So you set up,
and I'm going to interrupt real quick. So with that culinary, is that a subsite, or is that just an app within development?
It's a subsite. So say culinary, if I, like over here where I'm going to set up my new, it would be in develop, in my development root site, I would have a subsite for culinary that I only allow certain users in.
Gotcha.
And so
you've got a culinary subsite below develop.
Right.
All right. Cool.
And then I have a tray order, and I have a World Wildlife Fund. I have all the different clients I'm working, they have a subsite, and they have privileges. Since it's broken inheritance, they only have privileges within that subsite, and then I can set their permissions. They may have And especially once it's on their site, they may have users that are read-only, or they may have some that are owners, which means they can do pretty much anything they want to in that site. And they may have some that are just for add, edit, delete, which is members. Okay, so let's stay with the overview, and we'll get back to that. So you set up a sub-site, you give them permissions, and you know, whether they're internal or external users, it works the same. You set them up, and everyone's logging in with a Microsoft login, because that website is sitting on that SharePoint. So it's a SharePoint. They're logging into the web app from SharePoint with a Microsoft login. And I wanted to say, you know, I was telling you the default groups are owner, member, visitor. I go back to the member, and I'll show you that when we get into it. And I change it to contribute. Member defaults to edit. But if you change it to contribute, then they can't see the cog to download it into Access. All right, and then so SharePoint, that's one way of maintaining your security. The other way of maintaining your security is with code in your app. And everything's based off of this right here, this user display name function. And you can get as, you know, low level to complicated as you want, but it's this user display name tells you who just logged in to your site, to your app on your site, and you can manage that. And I'll be giving an example of just a one-step navigation menu. It's not really meant to be high security, because this particular client doesn't care who gets into any of the app. They just want it, you know, because the main user, they're using an 8-inch tablet, and they just want touch. Everything's touch. And so it gets them in to where they want to be, quick and easy. So I have navigation that keeps them out of the administrative area, which requires, you know, a keyboard. And then I have one to show you what it would look like if you got a little more complicated with a 2-step navigation menu. And then I didn't have time to set this up, but you can also set up a user security level table like you do in a desktop app that sets for every person that logs in. You can give them not SharePoint permissions, but additional, you know, which menus they can go to, which data they can look at, and you can set that up by having one of these tables in your app. And right now it's a little flaky as far as I'm concerned, because there's no such thing as a password type field in Access Web App. So, you know, you see your password when you type it in. It seems a little awkward. But in fact, especially while I have, you know, people watching the recording, I want you to be aware, in case you turn this off here in a little bit, there is Luke put up a suggestion in the Access User Voice, and because I was looking to see, you know, from one time to the next, you never know what's been added, and sometimes it's hard to know what all the new features are. So I thought I'll go to User Voice and see if there's a password field that's been created since I last checked, and it doesn't look like there has been. But even better, Luke, if you are familiar, this guy is the master Access developer. He has a business that creates add-ins for Access. He says, make it easy to create a system that lets people, members, log in and update their personal information. This is a basic foundation of any web database solution. It lets the information worker customize the field the user should maintain. You know, like the hashtag for passwords, forgotten passwords, reset emails, lock out users with too many failed attempts, admin interface for resetting lock members, all that. He thinks that should just come with it, and I can't agree with him more. And there's only 6 votes for it. So if you think that's a great idea, come out here to Access User Voice and vote. I only had 1 vote left, and so I gave it 1 vote. And Julian, he didn't give it any votes, but he really likes it too. Julian, he writes it, lots of Access web apps and sells them in the Microsoft Store. So he's, totally for this. So I just want to say that this would solve a lot of problems right here. But I said, in the meantime, if we could just at least have a password text box control, like we do in desktop.
Judy, one of those votes is mine.
Oh, yay.
I only have 1
Have
left.
any more votes? Put on any more. That'd be great. So this would be like Supreme Security via app coded, and if it came coded for you, even better. So that's the overview. The details of how you secure your web app are pretty, that's it that I know of. But the details of it, we can talk about some ideas. You may have more ideas than I've come up with. I'm sure Julian would give you even more. And George here, he wrote a book on it. So I'm glad you're in the audience, George. So I'm going to show you a little bit how I set up my SharePoint and how I encourage my clients to set up theirs when I pass it on to them, because that's part of your security.
And Judy, I wanted to ask, could you put the link for that Access User Voice item into the chat window so that other people, if other people are interested in voting for it, they have that?
Yeah.
That'd be great. And if other people don't know, there's a user voice area for Access. Just go to access.uservoice.com. They have both areas for Access Desktop and Access Web Apps, and they give you the opportunity to vote for different items which they'll try to incorporate into the system. I saw just a few days ago that one of the features that they've added is the ability to connect to DBase, the really old DBase engine, and so I do know that they are looking at that, and they're trying to accommodate us. So take advantage of that when you can.
And before I proceed, George, do you know of any other ways besides these just quick overview code in your app and SharePoint permissions?
Not really. You've covered what I'm aware of.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to jump into SharePoint
I do have one comment to make, though, while I
Okay.
What I do is sort of a pseudo mask for passwords. Is I make them I make the fore color and the back color the same.
Oh, excellent. Excellent. Oh, that excellent. Did everyone catch that? So say you're, so you had, let's see if I have one open. I can't remember which one I'm doing first. I think I'm doing this one. So say you had a login screen, which I don't. So say login's right down here, and you made the type, the font white, so for password field, and that way the background white and the white font would, keep you from seeing the password. That's great. I saw someone, I was reading someone down here, Dr. Cole, he was saying, and some Jeff Conrad, I don't remember who it was, who was saying, well, number one, it's something that's been requested now, he's saying. But another guy said if there was an OnKey event, you could, cover your typing with stars, but there is no OnKey event or anything similar. There's not many events in Access Web Apps yet. Okay. Subsite, invite users. Okay, that's really what we're going to cover. So let's go here. So I think what I'll do is I'll just create one from this demo, or maybe I'll do it from develop because I'm going to need to create one here in the next couple of days anyway. So say you get, that's not good, timed out. Don't let it time out on you. They're very secure, which is good. Should never complain about it. So this is a brand new site. Like I say, I'm just now building out my sites on my new E3. So the settings for this is me, right? With full access to everything. And so I would like to create a site. Oh, I have some. Never mind. I have culinary health medics. Okay. So let's say I want to create a new subsite for a new client. Have a new client coming in. We'll call it Acme. And this is what will show up, like here. And this will be here. And I want to break permissions because the people I give permissions to this site, I don't want them up in my site or in my other client sites. And so when you do this, it switches things up, and it's pretty smart. For the clients, you don't really want the parent site links because, that's your links. Theirs will be just a standalone site. And you create it, and it will give you 3 default user levels. And it could be you're developing for a client and they will actually use your site. That's certainly an option. So they're giving us visitor, which is read-only, member, which is contribute. It says contribute, but I think it's not actually true. And then owner, which has full control of this particular website. And we'll say OK. And then I'm going to show you those site permissions for the member, which it says is contribute. It's actually edit. And we want it to be contribute. So with contribute, it's pretty much the same. It's add, edit, delete. This is add, update, delete. That edit includes the cog that you usually see on a web app over here, where contribute doesn't have that. So I'm going to change that to contribute. And so far, I haven't found anything those guys cannot do except for download the app. So I created the subsite. I showed you how it comes with 3 permission groups, and you can go back and change the member one to contribute. It comes set to edit, and that it doesn't matter. All my users are external users, and I guess the only difference would be they don't have to have that initial email. Probably looks a little different since they're already users to the SharePoint site. And so we covered that. So now we're going to move into app coded security and this user display name. And I'll show you just an easy. I use it for navigation ease more than I do for security. So we're going to go to trade order. So with this one, the full database is behind this. I'm not trying to keep them from it because no matter what kind of code you put in here, all they'd have to do is that, right? So it's the security is through SharePoint. This is just for navigation ease. So when they open the app on their little 8-inch tablet, they don't want to type anything. They want to push buttons. And so this app is written where they don't type anything. Everything is a selection or a drop down or a button. And so they click this and it takes them into a tray order area. You know that this is all touch screen, and it takes them to a touch screen. The administrator of this site, has a keyboard. And so my code is in here. And I will show that to you. This is tray order. So on tray order, there's nothing. Oh, there is. Never mind. That's where I'll put it. So if they open the tray order, it takes them to that second navigation screen. But I don't restrict them. On administration, so all the users on this app, there's like maybe, say, a dozen different 8-inch tablets, and each tablet has its own login. So it's a login per hall of this facility. So there's tablet, check-in tablet 1, check-in tablet 2. Well, actually, this is tray order. Tray order tablet 1, tray order tablet 2, tray order tablet 3. All those logins. If it's one of those guys, it's saying this is the wrong button, basically. It will give them a message that says this is for administration. But if they go back and push the other button, it takes them to their just to their tray order screen, right? And the administrator, it just closes this out. So really the purpose of this is just to get the people with the 8-inch tablets to that tray order screen, right? And so the code is, if the left 7 characters start with CSP tab and they're named, 1 through 12, then, just remind them that that's, not the route. And so what it would do is it would just pop, if they hit administration, it would just say, no, not this way. And so then they say, oh yeah, this way. But they don't. Anyway, it was just something the people who had the app, they just said, we want everything to be touch. We don't want them to have to come in here and be confused, especially the new users. And so that's what they have. Now, if you want a little more security, and I just did this yesterday, so it's kind of quick and dirty idea of something just one step further. So this one, you don't see the database, right? We're serious about if this one, it says it's kind of like the other, it says if your first 6 characters start with, I guess check-in tablet. Is this a check-in? Yeah, check-in tablet. because there's check-in tablet, one for every hall. You can't come here, but I'm logged in as me. Everybody else, so that's where SharePoint, it's a combination. SharePoint is not going to let anyone in here except for the administrator of that database. It doesn't care what her login is. All it knows is it doesn't start with CS, it doesn't start with check-in tablet. Everybody else that has permissions to this app, they start with check-in tablet. And so anyone can go in here. So there's no restriction to this. The administrator could go in here if she wanted, but of course she doesn't want to because she has it right here. So does that make sense? So this one, that's not a whole lot that you have to do to keep, just because it's a combination of what I did in SharePoint and what I did through the code. So here there's no restriction. What does it say? Open the check-in. So the check-in form, which is what they're here for. They're the check-in people. The administrator, it opens up that second navigation menu, but it only opens it up if your login doesn't start with check-in tablet. Right? So right up here it says that the int navigation 0 is for administrator. So what I do, the default is 1, and I defaulted that right here on start. The int navigation is 1. And then it says to open up that navigation menu. So when they get to the int navigation menu, it's set to 1, which means you must be these guys, right? But if you click this and you didn't start with check-in tablet, it lets you in. It turns you to 0 and it lets you into the second menu. So clear as mud? It's kind of a backwards approach to it. But you could just as easily, so in all my desktop databases, and this gets into a homemade version of what Luke's asking for. So I have desktop databases that use a table. And I didn't have time to develop it, but here's what the table looks like. There's a column here called security level. And so you can write code in your app. So for, say, hope you're not dizzy yet, for every one of these buttons, you could have, a security level of 0, get you in here, security level of 1, get you in here, security level of 2, get you in here. And then once you get into these places, you could, and I would, Andy, you'll be interested to hear this. I think you could, like I said, I haven't done this for a web app yet, but in my desktop app, I filter out data depending on the levels also. And so this table, you can write code in your app, and maybe it's difficult with the web app. It works great in desktop. That says, depending on the security level, you can see this data and not this data. You can see these forms and not that form. So
yeah, and I think from a form standpoint, I think that's good. The issue that I ran into early on with that waterfall software was that when the form was opened, it would filter based on what bank that had entered the data. And let's say I had, at that time I only had like 5 banks. And what would happen is that I would have that left-hand filter there which is and they could type in like the number 1, and when you type in a number 1, it defilters everything on that form and shows everything again. But the way you're utilizing it, you don't have that filter on your form, which protects the user, from doing that, from that happening.
Well, see, that's one thing you'd have to do is either you would have to change the data source of this form so what he's saying is, even though this form is filtered down to say morning games, morning activities, you could probably bring up an afternoon activity just by doing this, right? But so one option is you can, is that true? I think you can get rid of this.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, you would just have to avoid the list views.
You have to avoid the
list views that allow that.
Yeah, because I think once you have a list view there, I don't think you can delete that list area.
Okay.
Unless that's changed. So you have to actually...
You have to change the data source so that it can't even find afternoon games, afternoon activities.
Exactly. And the data source, I had to do it based on a query because I was adding a filter which didn't do everything I needed it to. I needed to have it bound to a specific query, and because of that, I ended up having to create a single form with a query bound to each individual bank. So I had to make 5 copies of that form, each of them bound to their own bank's query, if that makes sense.
So, like I say, the concept would be maybe you can control the data they see with changing this from a table to a query, and have the query based on their security level. But if it can be done, I'll be trying it probably here in the next few weeks, just to prove if I can or cannot, I guess, for a client that will need it. But for sure you can control the forms they look at, which I just showed. That's exactly what we did, these forms. So administrator can see this menu, and people whose login starts with check-in tablet cannot see this menu. They can only see the check-in menu or form. It's the only form they can get to. So you could be more here with my code. I'm saying if you're not this, everybody, it's kind of one of those. If you're not check-in tablet, you can go in here. Where if you did it with the table, it would be. So where is it? This one. You could control which form they're looking at by their security level. Yeah. I think I was going to say something else, but I've already forgotten. So I think I kind of covered. I didn't do this one, so that was just what we just covered there. And George, I like that. George, that's a great job. For color to match background color. All right. I really thought that's what I did last time, but it did this because it.
Exactly, and so when you're clicking on that, then it changes it. So just click off of that, and then share, and we'll see how that goes.
That's interesting that George has been having problems with that too. Well, it had to. Since I had to delete all my users, it didn't get it from SharePoint. It got it from Skype for Business.
Yeah, that's pretty weird.
Because Skype for Business, Yeah, it's the MVP one. Maybe I should change that.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of a cool thing that it's already got the name in there so that it doesn't have to go looking for it. But you know, because now, that update isn't coming through. It's not that email isn't coming through.
Yeah, it's going to your MVP, I guess. Oh, okay. Here's a thought. Maybe you guys will learn something. Hopefully we're not wasting your time, but we're teaching you something. Well, I'm just going to do this. So there. And then I'm going to create you over here.
Delete me from there. Oh, change my email there. WorkSmartDB. Don't forget WorkSmartDB.com.
Oh, thank you.
So now, so now I've actually got 2 emails stored there.
Do you?
Yeah, so you'll try and see if you can delete that primary email then, that one. You'll probably have to edit it again.
I don't know. What do you just?
I would just delete it, hit delete.
It's in. It says it's in Outlook.
Outlook, which is still showing that. Can you do it? Control A and delete that email out of there?
Uh-uh.
Wow, once it's there forever. So I can see the demo site. On the left-hand side, I've got tray order demo 5, report URL demo, and check-in demo. Do you want me to open one of those?
Yeah, open one of those. And if you don't have a cog, let
Yep.
us share your screen and see that, and
Yeah,
share your screen.
Yep, let me do that real quick. I'm going to take over a presentation for a second. Okay, and so on mine, you can see we've got the trade order app, we got trade order entry and administration, but at the top right, where there's usually that little cog, that little settings, is not there. So I can't download it, and I can't add any Access Web App add-ins there.
But you should be able to add entries.
Yeah, I should be able to add entries here. So yeah, I can get into edit. I can add. I can submit. So I'm fine there. So I'm in good shape. I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to you, Judy.
All right.
Question?
So, Charles or
Yeah, go.
Jimmy, Do you have any questions or some security problems you're having?
Well, the question was, is the first screen that you got to, Andy, was the first page where you could see the recent options.
Right.
How do we get, we don't want people to see that.
Yeah, and so what I've had to do is, and I don't know if actually there's a way to prevent people from seeing SharePoint at all. What I've done is I've gone into edit mode of this SharePoint page, because you can go into edit here up in the top right, and I can delete out all of the features that I don't need. And then what I'll do is just at the top, I'll have the name of the single app that I want them to get into. And that's the only way I've been able to prevent them from doing it. Unless, Judy, have you run into that?
Charles, what I do, this client I was telling you, they have an 8-inch tablet and they don't want to do anything except just do their tray order entries and then put the tablet down. And so what we did for them, we put an icon, that tablet, we took everything off that tablet. I mean, everything. All it knows how to do is go to this application, and it's a shortcut. The icon, is their company icon, but when you click it, it opens up the app itself. It doesn't even go to the SharePoint site.
So how do
Their
you do that?
permissions are to the site, but the shortcut on their tablet opens the app. They've never even seen the SharePoint site. I don't think they would even know how to get to it, because they just have an icon, they click it, it opens the app.
How?
Now, the administrator of the database, they open the site, but all the tablet users, it just opens the app.
So how did you do that?
Well, it's just a shortcut link. So you highlight the address bar up there, the HTTPS, and you make a shortcut to it. At this very second, I can't even remember how we did that in OneNote, and see if I can come up with that. If I do, I will put it in the notes that go with this video. I will say there's a small annoyance. Every time we run an update to the app, the actual address in that address bar changes ever so slightly, and he has to create new, he has to go in and edit that link on every one of those. I think I don't remember how many tablets there are now. There's one per hall, or 2 per hall. And he has to go reset the link on that icon every time I run an update.
That's great. Useful to see.
Yeah.
So what kind of change was made to the URL? Did the URL actually change, or did it add something? Or?
Let me start proceeding.
And you should be able to present again.
So, it's probably some little minor thing. Let's open an app. Maybe I have an app open. No, I don't. Looks pretty straightforward, doesn't it? I bet that 0 turns to a 1 or something like that. No, that wouldn't be it, because that's the server. That's pretty basic. No. All I know is I got to call the first update we ran, and he's like, none of the shortcuts work. So I came in. I said, well, okay, so the HTTPS is actually slightly different. So we reset them all, and then we kind of forgot about it until I ran another update, and he called and says, all the shortcuts don't work. I said, you're on your own this time, buddy. So. And, you know, I will say for almost everything I say, it works a certain way. You know, they run things in the background all the time. That's the way it was at one point, I will say. Oh, just a reminder, everybody go vote for this template. That would be great. Personal update, member update template. And look for other things that might help you out.
Yeah, I think at last count there was like 157 items on that list. So it's you know, I wonder if there's got to be ways to sort out which ones are the biggest ones, or if there are ones that they're actually going to be working on, I wouldn't want to vote on any of those, you know,
Right,
if
right.
they started working on it.
Well, it actually was very hard for me to find. I did the way I found this one was by searching on password.
Gotcha.
It was in there, right there.
Gotcha.
157 to 384. So, Andy, you're an MVP. Last I heard, the last department head that came into Access has kind of switched the focus back to these guys. And it's not that they're not supporting web apps, they're just not really looking at these.
Yeah,
Is
I
that
think,
true?
well, in November, one of the at last year's summit, one of the frustrations that a lot of MVPs had, and this is an NDA, so I can talk about it, but one of the frustrations that people had was that there was so much concentration on web apps, and desktop has been around since 1994, and so there was just a lot of frustration that people, you know, were like, you know, here we've got this brand new Access Web Apps thing, but nobody's putting any attention back on Access Desktop, and that's still where, you know, at least 95% of the people that use Access are living in that space. And so, and you can even tell here, I mean, there's 384 ideas versus 157 for Access Web Apps. That alone tells you, I mean, how many new things that people are asking for Access Desktop. And so they heard that loud and clear, and they said that they would, you know, focus on, you know, giving us enhancement for Access Desktop because they know it's not going away anytime soon. George and I were talking about Access Web Apps a little bit earlier today, and he expressed some frustration that some, and he didn't go into detail, but he said that some of the features that had been in Access Web Apps are now deprecated. So, and he didn't tell me which ones they are, but I do know because I was asking him about, you know, where you can integrate Bing Maps and you can integrate Power BI tiles and things like that. And he said that now there's only about 4 items that you can bring in as basically an iframe into your web app. The others kind of went away. And so, you know, that's, you know, that's kind of where things stand. I know there's been a lot of talk about, I mean, Power BI is there's a lot of attention being brought to Power BI. There's a lot of attention being brought to PowerApps. But I think a lot of Access Web Apps people are like, well, they're not planning on going to PowerApps, anytime soon, because it doesn't have the power that they feel that Access Web Apps does. And I do see a distinct difference between Access Web Apps and PowerApps, and maybe next month or somebody I'll talk a little bit about what PowerApps is and maybe give a demonstration of it. I think it's in general release now. I'm not sure if it's still in preview mode or not, but people can go to powerapps.microsoft.com, and I think they can still sign up for it if it's not widely available. But I know there's a lot of talk about that. The thing I like about PowerApps is that if you have like an iPhone, you can make an app that runs on your phone, and it fits into that smaller
Yes.
size. Whereas with Access Web Apps, you have to do a lot of finagling to try and make that fit onto an iPhone. And when you build a Power App, you can it uses the responsive technology like some WordPress sites, so that if you have an iPad app and you run it on an iPhone, it'll automatically resize. The other thing I like about Power Apps is that when trying to get an app published through the Apple Store is a real pain to do, and every time you submit an app, even though it's similar to an app that you've done before, it goes through the whole process again, and it's kind of a frustration to do that. Well, what Power Apps have done, and I think I've mentioned Alpha Software in the past. And
Yes.
Alpha Software, when you develop apps, you have to go through the same process of getting apps approved through the Apple Store. Basically what Power Apps does is it's kind of, I equate it to thinking about Excel. If you open up Excel, you can run any kind of spreadsheet that you want on it. You can have a list of your to-do list. You can have your financials, whatever you want to use that Excel sheet for. And you're not changing the Excel itself. You're just choosing what to run underneath it. That's kind of how Power Apps works. Is that Power Apps was approved in the Apple Store, and now anything that you run in Power Apps, you don't have to get it approved again. And so it just runs underneath that foundation, and you don't have to worry about it. You'll also notice up on your screen, you see the third item says flows. Well, the flows within SharePoint were deprecated in, was it 2013? Those it used to be called Infopath, if you remember Infopath. And that kind of went away, and then they were talking about incorporating that into Access Web Apps. Well, now they've turned that Infopath and made that part of Power Apps, so you can build those pieces into it. So, for instance, like in SQL, you can have a trigger so that if a record was added to it, it can tell you to do something. Well, a flow will work the same way. So you can tell a flow, instead of with an Access Web App or even Access Desktop, basically you have something where it's looking at either an on-click or an after update, or it's looking for something on the form to happen for you to know that something happened. Well, with flows, it's going straight to the data source. It's looking right at the table. So if there was a new record added to a table, you could say, hey, if a record is added to a table and I didn't add it, send me an email about that. And so you can build in logic like that into it. The other cool thing is that basically what you're doing is you can have your IT people create APIs that basically are building the building blocks of a flow, and then an end user, without needing to know how to program, can say, okay, just insert this block, and if it does not equal, Andy Tabus, then do this. And so you'll be able end users, they're anticipating that end users will be able to use these instead of having to write an API, because the IT team can do that. So I think that there's a lot of promise for that. But I mean, if you go into PowerApps and you look at their forums and everything else, they're just like it's not. A lot of people are just like it's not quite there.
Yeah.
But I think that
And of course, that's what these are for. They have user voice for those guys also, right?
yeah, I'm sure they do. I haven't even looked at that. I'm sure they do. Yeah. The other thing I like about PowerApps, and I don't know if this is gonna change or where it is right now, where it's going, but one of the nice things about PowerApps is that you can connect to different backends. So if you have SQL Azure, if you have Excel, if you have a SharePoint list, if you have Salesforce, you can connect to different backends. Whereas with Access Web Apps, it's self-contained into a basically a SQL Azure SharePoint list.
Right.
That's what I call it. And I think the ability to connect to those different things is pretty cool too. And that's how Power BI works. With Power BI, they have, I want to say, at least 60 different backends that you can choose, including user voice. You can use user voice as a backend. You can use Google Analytics. You can use MailChimp.
Okay.
There's just a lot of different backends, and I can see Power Apps going that direction. But I did a search on user voice for Access because I was like, I'd really like to see Access Web Apps be able to connect to SQL Azure as a back end. And on two of them, they said, even Julian said, I don't think this is a very good idea. Well, I disagree with him, but because I think Access Web Apps would be more widely used if you could connect to different backends.
Right. And if you could give it that responsive screen like the PowerApp has.
Yeah, if
Well,
you can
there's
have
a
it
whole
so that
list.
it changes depending on what size you're using. But I mean, I've got a client out in Detroit called the Little Wedding Chapel, and Teresa has mastered the art of running an Access desktop app using I think Join.me or GoToMeeting. I mean, she can fly through that app now. Even though she has to scroll three screens over and down, she's she's able to do that. But I know a lot of clients, when you're first getting into it, that's not that's not ideal.
I would open these up. It's been several months since I created them. I don't remember what they look like.
Yeah, and if you'll notice on the left-hand side under Manage, they've added this Entities was just added about a month ago, and what that does is you can create a little internal database, and it's got a lot of standard tables in there, like customers and I can't remember what they all are, but like tasks and a bunch of things that people would normally use inside of a database, and it builds those entities, and then you can create custom entities as well, and that's stored up in the cloud. And so when you share your app with somebody, you've automatically got, yeah, here you go. So you've got contact, you've got company, contractor, business unit. So it has these tables built in, and then you can click on them, and you can download either an Excel file or a CSV file, and you can edit this information, and it's you know, and there's a lot of things like caseworker assignment. I don't know if I'll ever use that, you know, and so it's like, well, a lot of these may not be used, but I understand why, you know, a little bit why they're doing that. I just think it's, personally, I think it's a little strange that these I think would be great, make great SharePoint lists. So why not have these all be SharePoint lists instead of entities inside of a Power App? And that's a question I haven't asked anybody yet.
Yeah.
And you can create your own custom entities as well. And I think once you create one, it's available to the other apps that you create. So, and they do have two, you know, there's two ways to edit. You've got the web interface, which is what you're using now, and they also have a download where you can run it on your PC. The one on your PC, you have to have version Windows 8.1 or 10, and I have 7 on this machine, which is my main development system, you know, and so I have to pull out my Surface Pro 3 to do it. But yeah, if this, I don't know, if people are interested in learning more about Power Apps, maybe I'll take a session and talk. Charles, is that something you'd be interested in, or?
Yeah, I can see the value of exploring that.
Okay. Well, maybe we'll do that. Maybe next month we'll take a month away from Access Web Apps and just kind of talk about what Power Apps are and kind of where I envision it fitting within the Microsoft world, and compare Power Apps with you know, with Access Web Apps. The one I know, the one thing that people don't like about Power Apps is that you can only share it within your domain. So you cannot you cannot use Gmail, you cannot use Hotmail, you can't have a you know, a fake on Microsoft.com account. You have to have a WorkSmartDB.com. It has to be a business or school account, and you can only share apps, Power Apps, within that environment. So
So it's
you know,
kind of useless for me, who's a business of one.
right. Well, right. Unless you're doing stuff for, you know,
Right.
our team, and then we've got, you know, 10. But you're right. I mean, yeah. But I mean, but the one thing you can do, and like I'm working on an app just on the side, and what I'm doing is I'm building an app of all the SQL Saturdays, because I speak at a lot of SQL Saturdays. That, like, Thursday I'm flying out to Dallas to speak at their SQL Saturday on Saturday, and so I'm creating a little database of all the SQL Saturdays, and that's something that I can create. I can post it on the Power App Store. Other people can download it, just like you can take a .app file and make it your own. It's the same kind of a thing with Power Apps. I can make it and I can share it, but then they have to put it inside of their own, you know, foundation. So, good. Well, good. Well, I appreciate your presenting. You know, today I think people got a lot out of it. We had a lot of
This is
really
very
good questions.
valuable. Very
Good.
valuable, Judy. Thank you a lot.
You're very welcome.